It is 7 p.m. on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, and I call to order this regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. Attending live for this evening's board meeting are board members Christine Malik, Allegra Smishek, Peter Tensing, and I am Vice Chair Tim Paulus, presiding over this meeting tonight. Joining us virtually is our Chair, Crystal Baraki, as well as Director Paula Cole. We are joined at the table here by Superintendent Nunowski, and also virtually are several district staff members, as well as in person, and you will hear from some of them later in the agenda. Chair Baraki and Paula Cole join us virtually as allowed by Minnesota State Statute 13D.021 in light of the peacetime state of emergency declared by Governor Walz due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Richfield Public Schools' mission statement is that we strive to inspire and empower each individual to learn, grow, and excel, and that is especially important for us to keep the center of our meeting tonight as we note that today marks the first day of our 2020-2021 school year. We also want to welcome those of you who are watching us live. Thank you for joining us, as well as those watching on the live stream who are legion in the literally half dozens or so, according to our tech people. So far, it's going to grow. We're about to go viral, I worry. So thank you for joining us. And with that, our first item on the business this evening is to approve the agenda that is before us. I will ask for any comments or questions related to the agenda.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move approval of the agenda as presented.
And I second it.
We have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Smishek. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Ms. Cole, do you have any comments on the agenda?
I do not. Thank you.
Chair Baraki, any comments?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Hearing no further discussion, I will poll the board. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ms. Cole, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right. Ms. Baraki?
Aye.
All right, the Vice Chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. Thank you. Now we're cooking. We will move into the first informative bit on the agenda is the information and proposals, and these are non-action items, and we will hear from the Superintendent Unowski on the school launch.
Thank you, Mr. Paulus. Obviously, as you know, today was our first day of school, but it was the beginning of a school year like any other, or unlike any other. I'm sorry. Already making a mistake on my first part of this presentation. We actually began school today, and we are starting school in Richfield Public Schools this year with a week of distance learning, and we have individual family conferences happening this week. And we plan to start our hybrid model on September 14th. And one of the things for us to keep in mind is we are monitoring Hennepin County case rates as guided by the governor to continue to examine. Hennepin County case rates have continued to slowly go down. Current case rates are 19.5 per 10,000 residents of Hennepin County, indicating the option available for actually full in-person elementary and hybrid secondary. However, it's important to note that with case rates hovering around 20, we are going to continue to monitor and remain in hybrid as we examine how to most effectively run a hybrid model according to the social distancing and capacity needs of both the district but then also of the overall county. One of the things that we're also noting is that we're keeping our students in pods and keeping ourselves ready to move to a fully distanced model if that's something that we need to do. We were ready to pivot on a moment's notice to that direction. But also are ready to move to a less restrictive model, such as fully in person, if case rates continue to go down. That is something we would take our time with and only do that with extensive, slow, and very logical, in-depth planning. So this week, we are having conferences with parents. A number of them are happening in person, a number of them are happening online, and then distance conferences are happening for distance students. Really, the goal of this week is to build relationships with our kids, establish those rituals and routines, and essentially do everything we can to make sure that we are set up for success, both in person and in a distance program. This means distributing materials, student schedules, books, Chromebooks. Some of the things that we would have done in advance are actually happening during this week, like assigning students to classes, making sure of our bus routes, and double-checking each of those logistics. Because unlike in years past, each student ends up with an assigned seat on an assigned bus run And we really need to balance things very, very specifically in ways that we hadn't necessarily in the past. Distance learning overall. Distance learning overall is one of those things that we are offering to all of our families. And around the state, the governor has directed all schools to offer distance learning. We have asked for families to commit to distance learning or commit to whichever model. Temporarily, we put a deadline of September 4th so we could assign students into both hybrid and into distance learning. But it's also important to note that while we did distance learning in the spring, we've been planning all summer to make sure that our students are going to get a much larger and more robust program, including synchronous live teaching across all of their curricular areas, but also providing options for taped lessons in situations where if students aren't able to participate in a live instruction, those are also available. And then large amounts of small group meetings and small group discussions, particularly in the upper grades, to help make sure that our students are able to really grasp all the pieces of the curriculum. Within our hybrid program, it's really designed to reduce the number of students in the building each day. We actually have determined that not only are we able to go to 50% fire code capacity, but we realistically can only actually accommodate about half of our students in any given day, and while maintaining social distance within each of their buildings. We're also working and designed a program to keep kids in pods or in small groups to the best of our ability. And much like the governor, we have prioritized our youngest learner and making sure that we are incorporating distance learning into all of our work so that all of our students are prepared for distance learning in case we have to transition at any point during the course of this school year. At elementary, we've designed it with K2 coming 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Grades 3-5, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, so about half of the students on each day. And then on Wednesday, K2 students are in distance learning. Well, grades 3-5 are also in distance learning on Wednesday, and then the other 2 days where they're not actually in the building. And so we are working on situations where there is actually a grade level or a multi-age teacher at every building, and so we have found, one of the things we didn't realize at the start, is we're able to actually provide a distance learning by building, by program. So there is an RDLS distance elementary that is lined up with RDLS elementary. There is a STEM distance elementary, and similar for Centennial and Sheridan. So we've been able to keep students all within the same building with teachers provided by that same program. Class sizes, our pre-K have approximately 10 students per classroom. In K through second, we're somewhere in the 13 to 20 students per classroom. And then in 3 through 5 with our hybrid, we're looking at between 17 and 33 at this time in our program. And keeping in mind in 3rd grade through 5th grade, those are cut in half. So 17 would mean there are 9 on the first 2 days of the week and 8 on the second 2 days. 33, well, it seems like a large class size, and it is, has 17 on one day and 16 on the 2 days later in the week. And so those are split in half, keeping in mind that that is one of the biggest pieces that we're guided by. As we look at secondary, we also designed this to remain in pods, and so all secondary students are attending 1 day per week, prioritizing social emotional groups, activities, college and career advising, and other organizational supports from an advisory teacher. It does mean that all of our academic content courses are taught through distance learning. We also have designed an advisory time to be on a daily basis and synchronous, and so students are having that live interaction with their advisory teacher who builds that extra relationship with them on a daily basis. And then similarly, we do have all the students who have chosen distance learning are integrated into the courses with our teachers and with the students who have chosen to work in our hybrid program. And so unlike in elementary where distance students are taught by distance teachers and the hybrid in person are taught by hybrid in person teachers, at secondary all of our students are across all of our content levels. And class sizes in grades 6 through 12 range from 17 to 21 students in our advisories. In special education, and we wanted to make sure that our case managers are really being proactive, special education students can go anywhere from, and actually it has expanded beyond this presentation up to 5 days a week for some of our students, depending specifically on the IEP and individualized needs of each student. So some may be participating in 0 days a week, all distance, and some may be participating all the way up to 5 days a week. And basically it is clustered and supported based on those individual needs of the children as determined by the case manager, the family, and the team who will be working together to make sure that we're meeting each of those students' needs and aligning the expectations of our team to to the expectations of the IEP and what the student needs to be successful. Within our activities program, some of our activities have been postponed until the spring. For example, football and volleyball. However, we do have 4 sports this fall with a set of safety precautions put into place. So girls swim and dive, for example, there are no spectators allowed in the pool area. Mostly they are virtual meets, and so you video the meet with the time submitted, and that is the way they'll be competed. And then other sports with only home team spectators, limited spectators, or full social distancing in sports where students don't interact. We're also looking at clubs and additional activities. Just had a conversation with the activity director today about a virtual play coming this fall, and so trying to figure out how to support all of our activities in a distance model while making sure that we are maintaining all safety and security measures for all of our students. So which students are in our buildings on a given day? Monday and Tuesday, we have K2 and 3-5 Group A, and then also essential childcare, because as a district, we are providing childcare to students in grades K through 5 and also pre-K. And this is to families where if there is only one parent, that parent has been identified by the government as an essential worker, or in a 2-parent home where both parents are identified by the government as an essential worker. We also have on Mondays grade 6 and half of grade 8. On Tuesday, we have grades 9 and 10, and then also half of RCEP. On Wednesday, most of the buildings are empty except for the middle school, which has grade 7 and the rest of grade 8. And then we go to the second group of the second group of grades 3-5 on Thursday, Friday, along with Thursday grade 10 and 12, and the other half of RCEP. So in none of these areas, about the 25 to 30% of families who have signed up for full distance learning, those families remain with their students engaged in learning at their homes and on their home locations. Instruction overall, we continue to focus on best practices and study how to do most effective hybrid instruction, which includes some videotaped mini lessons, some in-person mini lessons, using what is our overall evaluation model by Charlotte Danielson, who has also completely transformed the evaluation model to include what does virtual online learning look like, to make sure that we are doing best practices, not just of in-person teaching, but also of what online teaching work looks like. And then getting support for instruction from all of the people in instructional leadership teams, from principals to teachers on leadership team to voices from all across the district, to make sure that we're really serving our students' needs and most effectively teaching when we get into our in-person instruction or online instruction. School times, we did have to make some changes, as you all know, to what our start times are. And so with the hybrid model, it required 45 minutes for each bus route because of enhanced cleaning, which required a 7:30 start time for Centennial and STEM, noting that it is still a 6.5-hour school day. Sheridan Hills and RDLS on the 8:15, 2:45 time, and then RMS and RHS starting at 9 and ending at 3:50. Looking at survey data, we had parents wanting school to start a little bit later with the online distance program. And so all of our online programs in elementary are starting at 8:15 to 2:45, and in secondary they start at 9 to 3:50 and are aligned to the time of the overall school. Transportation, which is one of the largest challenges and why we aren't adding more students or more days to the number of students in our building. Buses have to fill from front to back, and we have learned that a lot of the safety measures you would want to put in, like for example, a clear shower curtain, a plexiglass, a shield for bus drivers, none of those are allowable by the State Highway Patrol. And so you can't actually put any additional measures in place outside of full social distancing, which means one student pretty much sitting diagonally, 6 feet apart from the other, which reduces the capacity of our buses to about 22 students per bus. Then with a full cleaning in between, adds that extra time, which meant we had to spread out our start times and obviously move things to a little bit different than what we have done in the past. And then enrollment. And enrollment is really complex this year, and it provides more guessing than we have had in the past. We are continuing to add students at every site. We have talked about what open enrollment policy looks like here. We are not in a place to bring that back. 2 weeks from now, we may have a different conversation as we continue to add kids to both our hybrid program and our distance program. We are now closing some of our hybrid classrooms at this point, and in areas where we haven't closed the classroom, we are closing transportation for a short period of time because we can't necessarily assign students to a bus until we know now which of the seats are actually fully being taken and which ones are not. For families that have not responded to district communication, we actually penciled them into hybrid. We wanted to make sure that we, as we think about our equity vision of our district, if families aren't in open communication with us or have transitioned from their email or from their phone, we wanted to plan for them in person, because the only area with actual constraints on numbers is our in-person program. We can fit as many students as necessary temporarily into distance, but we can't fit more students than we can socially distance in a classroom. And so we wanted to make sure that we saved those spaces for all of the students, the one who had requested, but then also the ones that we have not heard from in general. And then essential childcare. So essential childcare is really grades K through 2 on Wednesdays, and then grades 3 through 5 really on the Monday, Tuesday, or the opposite on Thursday, Friday. And so we actually have a very small number. 39 students at present have registered for essential childcare. Many of those are first graders on Wednesdays. And so what we're trying to do is we're actually adding grades 3 through 5 students into the classroom of their regular teacher. One of the questions you may have about that is, how do you maintain the pod? Because now we would have a 3 through 5 student in one pod on Monday, Tuesday, and then in a different pod on Thursday, Friday. The reality, however, is that if all of those students end up in one room for childcare, we've actually broken the pod during childcare either way. And so there really isn't a way to provide essential childcare while maintaining students with their own pod and by grade. Because RDLS, for example, has, I believe, 7 different classrooms represented in the 9 students wanting childcare or needing childcare. And so there really isn't a way to fully give them childcare while keeping them fully separated in a pod. We are partnering with Fun Club for this. And so in exchange for some additional space, Fun Club is providing some additional supports to our childcare students. And so we are partnering with them and then adding paraprofessionals to the Fun Club staff to support our students in there. Because Fun Club is expert at providing childcare, our paraprofessionals will be using their skills to keep the students engaged in instruction and helping them to learn during that particular time. Staffing overall. So one of the challenges is we are staffed closer to 25 students per classroom on average in elementary. However, 20 students or fewer within a classroom means we need more teachers. And then in grades 3-5, while there may be a couple of class sizes that are larger overall, they all stand at 17 or fewer at a time. And so what we had to do is make sure that in each of our classrooms, no matter how many numbers of students show up, we are at or below the amount that can be at 50% capacity and also remain socially distanced. What that also means is temporarily we have some larger class sizes in the mid to low 30s, even in elementary in some of our distance programs. And so one of the things that we're going to have to watch, because there are points of tension over the next couple of weeks, is do we need to add some teachers or paraprofessionals to our distance classes to make sure that we are having adequate teacher-student ratios in those courses? Because obviously having 35 students in a kindergarten class with one teacher, even if it's distance, isn't really a best practice. And so we either have to look at adding a full-time paraprofessional or possibly looking at adding an additional teacher and splitting up those students. And that's one of the things that we have, similar to past practice, looked at during the first week or so of school and made adjustments as necessary. We are also looking for crossing guards because, as you know, one of the things that we had to do for transportation is change the hazardous crossing from our transportation. And so we have identified 13 patrol needs, and we continue to go out and recruit and look for people to become school crossing guards and patrols as paid positions to help make sure that we are supporting our students in transportation, even if that transportation is walking with expanded walk zones. And then food service. This continues to evolve, where we actually got new guidance again today. There was actually a new USDA waiver announced recently to allow an expansion through December 30th. The waiver allows for free food for all families to be distributed on-site or off-site or in a set of different locations. At the time of this being presented, MDE had not given guidance about that, how it would work, nor had they given guidance about funding. They continue to evolve and suggest that funding is available and that we should finish up the application. And so we look to most likely be able to launch a free lunch program probably starting Monday, aligned to our students coming in person. And so we are currently working on the logistics of that. And I'll be excited to share with the board what our full plans are and be able to report back what our food launch was that'll align to the new guidance. In general, in food service, we're actually going to be having students eating in their classrooms in pods. And so we are having students not go to the lunchroom in a large area, but they're staying in their classrooms, and distance learning students at this point are picking up food. But again, we are also looking at areas for delivering food, as we'll be looking for in the coming months. And that there are a set of safety components with a contactless point of sale, additional cleaning, additional sanitizing, social distancing, single-use condiments, some of those things that just make sure that we're in a much safer environment than we would typically need to be prior to COVID. Overall, health and safety, this is one of those where there's a lot of questions about how do you handle health and safety and how do you handle screening. And so we are following the USDA and the federal guidance on this. It's actually the CDC, not the USDA. We're looking for home screening, and we've sent out material and communication about home screening and how to best do that. We've worked with teachers and staff to train them on cleaning responsibilities and how to support. And then we have a whole what's called COVID decision tree. And so that if there are students showing any form of symptoms, we have a whole plan and process to follow that maps out what are those decisions. We'll continue to arrange everything in a social distance way with signs on the floors showing what that distance looks like. And then all of our buildings have and have already seen PPE distributed to them. And so our face covering policy, which will pass today, has the face masks in each building to support it, along with the sanitizer, soap, water, and all the cleaning utensils necessary to help us have that safe environment. Additional measures, obviously we are not an open campus anymore, so we are really having limited visitors to those that are essential. In any areas, much like the tables that we are at, if students have to sit at them and might be closer than 6 feet, we're looking at plexiglass dividers and have those in many of our buildings already. We're using water bottles, not fountains, not sharing school supplies, changing out furniture, and again, doing all of those precautionary measures to help make sure that things are clean, things are safe, and people are distanced to the fullest extent possible. With that, I have thrown a lot at you, and so I will open it up for questions or comments.
Thanks, Steve. I'll ask the board then, for those who are present, if you have questions or comments for the superintendent.
I have a question that bubbled up while my children were getting themselves oriented to their distance learning, and that is, given the amount of time in front of a screen, that we're expecting, do we have any thought on distributing paper textbooks, some of those traditional materials that would allow for students to do some learning that doesn't necessarily involve being in front of a screen?
Yes, so we are continuing to distribute as appropriate and as set up as many materials as humanly possible. And so this week, last week, some of the buildings began to distribute Chromebooks. This week, there are other buildings distributing Chromebooks. We also have textbooks, supplies, food, a wide range of different things coming home. And you can also assume that over the next several weeks, there will continue to be additional components and additional textbooks distributed by schools to help support a wide range of methods for students learning.
Excellent. No, that's great. I guess that I think I'm good. I'll hold on other questions for now.
One comment I had was on the distance learning by building. I know that it's important to a lot of our community members to stick with their school because they've chosen that school for culture or different programming. And I'm guessing it was a pretty complex puzzle to make that work with distance learning, so I appreciate that. I think you said it and I didn't quite catch it, the percentage of students and families opting for distance learning.
So this is one of the complexities at the moment. So I'm going to say 25%, but then I'm going to preface that with something to really put that in context because that could be way off. When we ended last year, we had about 95% of our students and families where we were sure that we had their contact information. That means that we're about 220 families that we were not still in contact with on a regular basis. A week ago, there were 1,000 students that we had no contact with at that point. That has gone down to closer to 600 to 700 at this point. So there are 600 to 700 students that we will figure out over the next week what their family plans are. And so that could really change things quite significantly. And so we have about 25% of our students that we know of who have selected distance, and we just don't know what's going to happen with the rest of the students.
That sounds good. And I think it makes a lot of sense to assume they're hybrid for planning purposes. So I thought that was really smart too. With the childcare, you mentioned having paras providing instructional support, and I was just curious if we were able to shift staffing to make that happen, or if we hired additional paras.
We are actually, for the most part, shifting staffing to make that work. Keep in mind that grades 3 through 5 are going into their actual classroom with their teacher, and so really it's only
Yeah.
Wednesdays. And since Wednesdays there are almost no students in the building, our paras aren't working with students as much. And
Gotcha.
so, and again, to talk about instructional support, the teachers are still doing distance learning on Wednesdays. The paras are there to help keep them focused and on task and support them. It's essentially, instead of being in their homes with parents or whomever overseeing, it's now our paras in there in our buildings.
Thank you.
Ms.
I
Mallett?
am just wondering, usually what I like to hear today is how things went and what was, the excitement in the building. So have you had any way to gauge how the distance learning and how the parent meetings and the things that were going on today, how things went, where things?
So I was in every
sit?
building today. I can say, conversation with a high school teacher. He had 14 of his 18 kids in his advisory today. He was super excited that he got to see kids and got to interact with kids. I talked to a couple of elementary teachers after conferences, and they were just excited to actually have kids in front of them because they were doing in-person conferences. They also were doing assessments of students. And so I think, there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of stress in our world right now. And I think for educators who are really in this field because they love kids, I think that getting them in connection with kids and families is starting to show. Just happy teachers and happy staff as they're beginning that. And I think that's going to continue to grow as we get our way into normal. So not as many exciting stories as I would typically have because we had a much smaller, obviously going to be extended over the week, set of people coming in.
Well, I'm sure we'll have more of that once we have kids actually in the buildings again. I'm sure that will be just as exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks.
Ms. Cole, do you have any questions or comments?
Always.
Please share.
So I counted the 10-second delay because I'm watching the screen. I'm one of the 14 loyal viewers. So this might be a little weird. First, I want to give a big shout out to our teachers for showing such flexibility and even still have a lot of excitement about the possibility of even if just listening to their students. I know I think to be a teacher right now, it's just really, you have to be a very special person, and they're going through a lot because this is hard. So I just want to give a big shout out to them and also to the district. I'm very pleased to see all the information about how we're thinking about rigor, how we're thinking about coaching our teachers and supporting them. I don't know how the system works in Richfield, but I know for training at other districts for evaluation is done with video very often. So for our certified observers, this is probably something that won't be as hard as other things have been. For worries, I am worried about class sizes. I actually think that we need fewer students distance and not more, because teachers, in order to provide differentiate the instruction, if they have 30-something kids, that means that there's small groups and less time to work on that. So I'm hoping that our paras are able to have the time and opportunity to do that. And I'm worried about the future when all of the students that who we haven't heard from, come back and make their decisions. I would like to know, and I think I'm just begging for reassurance that we do have, that we're ready for them. Because it's just all up in the air. Like, I guess that's all I have for now.
So first I would like to echo and concur that yes, I'm amazed by our staff and how they are facing this unknown exceptionally well, because it is obviously a very, very challenging time filled with unknowns across many, many areas. Distance and the number of students in a class is a challenge. Yes, we are definitely paying attention to that, and that is absolutely a stressor. The challenge we have at this time is that there is an actual numerical physical constraint on the number of people we can put in a classroom. And so we can't fit more than 18 in certain rooms, we can't fit more than 20 in certain rooms, and so we have to lock down those numbers. In terms of distance, yes, a best practice is for us to figure out ways to have smaller numbers of students. And ideally, one way is to do paras. We would also like to add teachers. Distance is one of the areas where, much like the first day of school, we don't always know how many kids are showing up. And so while 600 students we haven't heard from may sound very large, and it is, there's always 400 or 500 students that we haven't heard from who may or may not show up. As you recall, we often enter this week thinking we're 200-300 students over projection and could end up 100 or 200 students under projection. And so those numbers just always change quite significantly. I can tell you we're absolutely prepared. We have saved our spaces in our classrooms, in the physical spaces, for any and all of the students who we have not heard from. We want to make sure that if a student shows up, whether they've communicated with us or not, they are welcomed into a classroom, expected on a class list, and there is a desk for them, and they are ready to come in and learn. And so we are absolutely set for that. The area where there is the largest ambiguity, and I'm being completely transparent, is in our distance learning class numbers. And not all of them, there's just some where we have some larger than we'd like to have class sizes. That said, there are reports from other districts and superintendents around the state that that is the area where the highest percentages of no-shows are happening, where students are choosing other options and choosing other options later on in the game. And so what we'll continue to do is monitor, and we're excited by this week to get to meet all of our students and all of our parents, so that we will have a lot more information. And then also next week when students actually show up in the building, and making sure that we are set for that. And so we are going to do anything and everything possible to make sure that we are set to serve the needs of our students, whether they are physically with us or whether they are physically not with us, and whether they've been able to communicate with us or not. That is our responsibility to reach out to them and make sure we're doing that as well as we can. So we'll keep monitoring. We will shift class sizes as needed. We will add teachers as needed. And similar to every year, based on enrollment, which we have done in the past in these challenging conversations at the board level, we'll add teachers in the situations where we need to.
Thank you. Chair Brockie, do you have questions or comments?
I do, unsurprisingly, have a few of each. I think the first thing is just to echo what Paula's first comment was, and just wanting to share some deep appreciation. Having the opportunity to speak to educators in other districts, both inside and outside of Minnesota, I feel like I have a pretty good perspective that we should be proud of what we are doing in Richfield Public Schools at this moment. That does not mean that it is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we are doing well with the conditions that we are in. And it's important to name that and to appreciate the work that has gone into that. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Allegra and I were having a conversation, and we talked about if there had been a perfect solution to changing our educational systems, somebody would have found it by now. And there isn't, and we haven't. And so we're all doing the best that we can. And I think hopefully sharing what we are doing that is working, and at the same time really seeking learnings from other schools and districts that we can learn from as well. The second thing, other people have already just brought up the concern about the rising percentage of students that we just don't know right now how they are, where they are, what their needs are. For me, it goes well beyond whether or not they're enrolling in Richfield Public Schools, and is really focused on the well-being of them and their families, given this incredibly vulnerable time that we're in. what has happened in our world, in our country, here in the Twin Cities community specifically over the last several months is weighing heavy on me when I think about the number of students and families that we just don't have contact with right now. So I guess a specific question would be, what are we doing different? I hear that, yes, this is always a challenge for us at the beginning of the year, but I think the stakes are higher. And so I am eager to hear what are some things that we are trying and doing different to potentially break through. Because I think probably many of us have seen on social media that there are people posting there that they don't know what to expect, or they haven't heard from us, and maybe it's an email problem or maybe it's a text problem, but we have to figure out some new ways of connecting. And then I think the third thing, the final thing, is just to share something that I shared with our district management team when I had the opportunity to be there at the kickoff with Mayor Maria Reagan-Gonzalez a couple of weeks ago, which is if we are not taking this opportunity to radically rethink how we are structuring our system so that it better meets the needs of our students, I think we are failing and really missing opportunities to do things differently. I think if we just try to hold out until we can, quote unquote, go back to the system that we had before March of 2020, we are doing this wrong. So Steve, I don't know if there's more that you want to say about what some of those efforts look like right now, but I wanted to say that, and I wanted people to know that that's how I am thinking about this moment in time as well.
So there's a couple of things to respond to. One, in terms of outreach, typically we save home visits for later on in the school year. We have done mail, we have done phone, we have done email, but we also now have outreach and social work actually doing more home visits, trying to do well checks and check in on families that we have yet to see or hear from. And usually we wouldn't do that until later on in the school year, a week or two in, because it is, like I said, it is typical for 10% of our students to transition districts over the summer, and so that is normal in Richfield schools, and so we are trying to do the things that we can to gather information but also provide supports where needed and try to expand our outreach. In terms of things that we're deliberately looking at as the new normal, I think that the assumption that kids or adults or people will be together physically is not an assumption that we're going to try to continue on with. There will be things that are barriers because kids all have to be in the building and that we all have to be in the same room. We're already looking at PLC meetings of teachers across the district by grade level, opportunities to meet with families online that we had not taken advantage of in the past, instruction and education that we are looking at as being live or taped in the future that is not the same, and then just a wider range of social, emotional, advisory, mental health connection pieces that we're really trying to deepen and expand that we just haven't done in the past. And so I think there are things that we are already starting with as we begin, but honestly there's also a lot of things that we expect to learn as we continue on through the course of this year, because I mean, if we're really being transparent, which we are, 8-day planning in the spring to do a fully taped program is not the same as what we're trying to deliver now. And so there is a lot that we are trying to deliver and do at a much higher rigor level with much more engagement and live partnership with students and families than we were able to do in the spring. And we are under the belief that we have already looked at some of those things and added a large number of improvements. And once we launch this spring, we are fully engaged and committed with our team members to continuing that on as we move forward through the fall, knowing that we're going to learn a lot about how to continue to improve as we move forward. So I hope that answers your question, but then it also leaves, again, those questions for the future as we just continue to be in that continuous improvement, look at what we're doing, be proud of what we're doing, as you point out, but also never accept that what we're doing is the best and continue to work to improve it every single day.
Thank you, Steve. If I could, a couple of items that I flagged as we went through the presentation. You'd mentioned special ed students had the opportunity to attend based on working with the families, the students, and the staff to determine what is best for the students, and perhaps including up to 5 days of on-site if that's what was best for the student. I know there are sometimes challenges to change things on the fly for a student with an IEP, for example, And so are we afforded the opportunity to have more flexibility than typical in this if we want an abrupt change into more or less time on site for a student without the burden of the usual process, which is we have a meeting, we talk about it, we make a change, you have to see how it unfolds, and now weeks have passed in these strange times.
I think it's important to separate out what our student needs from the actual IEP document itself. So while the IEP document is a legal document and requires a set of needs and services, what the reality is on the ground, because most IEPs don't say physically present in building 4 days a week, physically present in building 2 days a week. That is more an interpretation of the student needs, and so our case managers are having these meetings and conversations with families. They've already started that, and they will continue on. And then along with our Executive Director of Special Programs and our Director of Special Ed, they're going to continue to have these meetings and dialogues to see what's working for our kids and what isn't. And so we won't probably shift an IEP on the fly. We will certainly be able to move and change around the dates of service and the amount of service that a kid needs on-site or distance based on what's happening and based on our ability to be responsive.
Excellent, thank you. Second question, and a little bit different, of course, is you'd mentioned on food service, that full distance learning has an opportunity to pick up a bundled meal bag for the week. Is there an opportunity for students, for example, say a student is traditionally a STEM student, do they have the opportunity to pick up lunch, say, on a daily basis at STEM, or must it be weekly?
For this week, we are doing mostly on a weekly basis. However, we anticipate that significantly transitioning as of Monday.
Okay. Right, because I know parents have suggested, right, that tie to the building and the maintaining a tie to the community is important, even if it's, seeing just a handful of faces that they're familiar with and the physical structure of the building itself. Okay.
Right, and just as a reminder, obviously, K2 kids will be in the building 4 days a week, and so there's lunch now 4 days a week and breakfast, and then our 3-5 will be in 2 days a week, and so it provides a lot more options and a lot more food in person being served on those particular days.
Now for elementary or secondary students on the hybrid model who have limited days, what is the structure for food service for them? For example, if we have a student in secondary who's free and reduced, are they weekly pickup on their?
So we were anticipating it would be a once a week. But again, as the new USDA guidance has come out, we expect that to transform and have some pretty significant evolution. Okay. Mr. Holsey, did you want to step up and grab the microphone?
No. And I respect that this is emerging and evolving by the day, and so just the extent to which we can openly communicate the state of things to the families in advance, instead of waiting for us to get to the final answer. Yeah. If we could be proactive about communicating what the state is, the status is, that would be helpful, I think.
So. I think the microphone's on. So just to clarify, and it was kind of restated already, that our goal is to be serving meals to every kid every day that they want it. Students will be going home with meals is what was currently planned for any of the time during the week that they would not be receiving it. So students who are here Monday, Tuesday for elementary would then get a 3-day pack to go home for them. At one point that was, or currently it's fee-based, so free and reduced would qualify for that. Recent guidelines came out last week that there is a window of time that will be free, like our summer food service program, not necessarily guaranteed through the end of the year and based on funds that are available. At the secondary school, students would have the ability to bring home a 4-day pack for the remaining week, spread out that way.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's it. Peter?
I just had a follow-up question on the, this is really a follow-up question to a number of the pieces that other members have asked about those students that we have yet to have contact with. I'm very, very pleased to hear that we're going to be starting up those home visits sooner. So what is the established practice should we fail to contact a student through that method? And are there agencies that we would be working with that would, if we're thinking the student is outside of our boundaries and kind of this whole piece?
So pretty typically over this next 2-3 weeks, we would get a large number of records requests for students entering other school districts. And so one of the most common ways that students transition is they start school wherever that may be, and then their new school or district requests records from us, and we're required to document where they went, or if we weren't able to figure that out. I'd say by about 2 weeks into school, we're going to be short only a handful of kids.
Yeah.
I'd say 50 or fewer where we won't know. In which case, we are able to go to each of those homes and also check in with the city and social services with the city and with the county to try to figure out where that student or family may have gone. And so it helps clean itself out over the next few weeks in a lot of those records request components. And then similarly, we are required to, it's called drop students from our enrollment after 15 straight days of not being in contact with us. And so ideally, and for the state and for state documentation, we have knowledge of every single student within those 15 days. So there's a lot of follow-up that continues to happen to try to track that down.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing from you is that there is a sort of a boundary on where our responsibility as a school district ends, but once a particular situation has crossed that boundary, it's not that that is then sort of the end of the story. There are other agencies and mechanisms that will continue following up with that in attempting to locate and make sure that this child is.
Yes, in addition to our own conscience,
Yeah.
we're actually expected to the fullest extent possible to figure out and document where that student ended up.
Yeah.
Be that moved out of the country, moved out of the state, entered a new school, dropped out of school. It's our role to figure that out and document that, and then actually report that back to the state.
Got it. So, I mean, I think obviously, yes, we'll be eager for follow-up on how that process is playing and making sure that we're hopefully getting the resources where they need to be, you know, if indeed this is, and it makes sense that the volume of kids to follow up on is greater this season. Yep.
Right. Well, and it's slightly more. Typically, we're still at about 10% going into the first day of school that we haven't had any confirmation from, and just
Yeah.
a little bit higher at this point.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Are there any final opportunity for questions or comments from the board? No? All right, great. Well, thank you for that update, Steve. We now move on. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. This is a bulk collection of routine business items that we as a board consent to pass in bulk and without comment. But before doing so, I'll ask if anyone on the board would like to remove an item from the consent agenda for additional consideration. All right. Well, hearing none, I will seek a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I will second.
All right. Well, we have a motion from Ms. Malik and a second from Ms. Smishek. I think I would have gotten it right by now, at least once, right? Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ms. Cole, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Bracke, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right, and the vice chair votes aye, and the consent agenda is approved. There is no old business on the agenda. We have left ourselves a clean slate as we enter this wonderful meeting that I get to preside over. We have a number of items on new business, and the first item we have is our new board policy 548, COVID-19 face covering. Superintendent Anowski.
All right, and so we are trying to step a little bit aside from our typical practice of reading policies 3 times and try to move forward with one official reading. However, we have gone back and forth with multiple board members and really looked at this and gathered feedback. We also reached out to our community and got parent feedback, got student feedback. We had over 175 people respond to or were reached out to specifically, including a wide range of diversity that represented the diversity of our district, both linguistically and also demographically, to make sure that we were gathering voice of both students and families in terms of our projected face covering policy. And obviously, our goal is to try to get this passed so that we can then move forward and finalize our training with our teachers and then also send out materials to families to make sure we're all on the same page of face coverings. I'll acknowledge that because this process is different, this policy is probably not perfect. This is the best that we can do given the time that we have. Comes from CDC guidelines and Minnesota Department of Health guidelines, along with experts in the health field, consulting with other schools and the School Board Association, and then also continuing to revise with feedback. With regard to this policy, it sort of defines what is a face covering and what is not. And I'll acknowledge that there are disagreements in what should be allowed and what should not be allowed. And so it defines it as a paper or disposable mask, cloth face mask, scarf, neck gaiter, bandana, religious face covering, medical grade mask or respirator, and transparent face mask. It also separates out that a face shield is an acceptable thing to wear, but it is not acceptable to be used in the place of a face mask. It also identifies that face coverings with a vent or a gap or a hole or a valve also do not qualify because those actually do not meet that definition. It also talks about what are exemptions. If there is a health exemption, a breathing exemption, a behavioral documented exemption, or different things that are needed from an exemption perspective, and lays out some guidelines as to what that exemption would look like. And then also talks about when, if there are reasons why somebody might be able to take off a face mask during school or at recess or in other places, what are those specific reasons and what are the things that we need to take into account. Attached to this guideline, we also have a student face mask guide, and this is a draft of what will go out in English and Spanish and multilingually to all of our students and all of our families, along with an exemption form so that people know that if there is a medical reason or some other reason that can be documented why somebody wouldn't be wearing a face mask or face covering, that's something we can follow up on also. And so I have this to present to you today and open things up for questions or comments.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do members of the board have questions or comments?
So I will acknowledge that in the time that we've had to review this, this policy has evolved substantially. And I just want to recognize the work of the administration and also the diligence of not only my peers on the board, but also members of the community who have given feedback on the content of this policy, and also acknowledge the responsiveness from the administration in terms of incorporating that feedback, and I think ending up with a document which I personally believe is finding the balance between sort of the risk of in-person activity and the benefits of in-person activity. We know that there is no way to achieve the benefits of this in-person education absent risk, and I'm satisfied that we're doing what we can to mitigate that risk in a way that is realistic and in a way that is can be implemented faithfully. And is clear. So I guess that's my appreciation, I think, for the work that has been done.
Thanks.
So I would second what Pete said. When I looked at the first draft of this policy, I had so many things to say, and I think we all included comments and suggestions and sent information, and I feel like almost everything I commented on was at minimum acknowledged but incorporated in some way. So I think everyone did a really good job in a short time of being able to pull this together. The one thing that Steve already knows that I disagree with, but I am fine with how this is ending up, but what I would like to see is the comments about the neck gaiter and bandana that are included in the policy, that they are generally not recommended by the CDC, but are not expressly prohibited, that somehow is included in our student guidelines so that no student is going to read this policy. So that if we put that in the student guidelines, at least they are aware of that difference or the difference between what the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC are saying, so that they're aware of that. I think part of our responsibility is to educate our students on how we've made these decisions and all of the complex things that go into it. So I would like to see that included in the student
So to
guidelines.
clarify and restate, moving forward with the policy, but as we look at the student face mask guide, as we described face coverings in the beginning, and I'm saying this out loud for Ms. Valley, is to add in there what is recommended and what is not by the CDC, so that we're clear on that in that first paragraph of the student face mask guide attachment.
Yep,
Thank you.
thanks.
Allegra, do you have comments before I throw it to the TV?
I do not. Throw away.
All right, thanks. Ms. Cole, do you have questions or comments?
I do not. Thank you.
Chair Baraki, do you have questions or comments?
Sure. Of course I do. Just again, iterating that individual members of the board have had multiple rounds of conversation and feedback with the district team, and appreciating the work that has gone into this, and the fact that we did take the time and make intentional effort to involve people in our community as well, because this is really important, and we had to get it done before people started coming back into buildings in person. I think my request is kind of related to what Christine said. We don't expect people to read this policy. And so I know Jennifer Valley, our communications director, is working on how to make this accessible and understandable to everyone in our community. And I think one of the things for me that feels helpful to make sure is very clear is what is up to individual discretion and what is not. And I'm specifically thinking about that, what is up to student and family discretion, what is up to the discretion of an individual teacher in a classroom, what is up to individual discretion at a school-based level, and then what are the things that are not up for discretion in any way, shape, or form across the district. And I think just trying to get as concrete and clear as possible on those things will be really helpful. And I say all of that to know that we do not have a world in which this is black and white. There is a lot of nuance here. We cannot policy every single word to meet every single possible circumstance. So I acknowledge that and appreciate the people who are already working hard to put this into play very, very quickly.
So yeah, Jennifer actually texted me as I said that, and we'll be changing the face mask guide accordingly. It's already prepared. We actually have worked with teachers on this already who have reviewed it and obviously walked it through. We actually have further training planned for both teachers, but then also students, to clarify once they arrive in our buildings on that first week of school, to make sure that we are reviewing each of those pieces, and that we are aware that this is not an optional policy, and most of this is not really up for conversation. It is really clear in terms of when you can or cannot, why you can or cannot have a mask on or off. And there are trainings and staff meetings occurring throughout this week, and then also with our students to just review and continue to reiterate this in an ongoing basis. So I appreciate all of that.
Thank you.
And can I add one more thing? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think I read this in the policy, but the encouragement of providing opportunities for students to have a moment without masks by going outside and social distancing, I think that is really important for all students, not just elementary, and for staff and faculty as well. So I appreciated that part in there, and I think it's important that we do strongly encourage our teachers and staff to take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
I will just echo the oddness of this being a first read and us thinking of passing it, a first formal read, but that does not mean we've missed out on the opportunity to edit, and the administration has worked very hard on it. I mean, the fact is, it is a mandate, and we have to have something in place probably before students arrive, because otherwise we're building procedures off of something that's not anchored or grounded in anything. It's interesting, Chair Baraki had said, we're not going to pick apart every word within it, yet that is my lone comment, is to pick apart a single phrase in it. And in an implementation 5B, we will provide face coverings to all students, and then it says employees will be provided face coverings and face shields to the fullest extent possible. And I would really suggest we change that to the extent practicable. I just worry about the requirements that the fullest extent possible could mandate upon us if challenged in a legal setting. If we have funding, the fullest extent possible, as I would interpret it, is we have to buy it. And I don't know what the price of these are, and I don't know where the price will go, and I don't know how many we will need. But there are limits to what to the face, between face coverings and face shields. And so I think we should clarify how that reads within the mandate and what we are required to do.
Director Pauls, isn't that updated in the?
No,
reading-
both words are in there.
Both words are in there. One's at the top of
Oh.
paragraph B, and at the end, we provide staff to the fullest extent possible, and then we provide for people to the extent practicable at the end of it, that same paragraph.
Okay.
And I think they should be in agreement that it should be to the extent practicable. And they should be in agreement, and it should be within what we are required to do. And so in a related thing, if you remember the discussion of the spring, before all of this hit, there was the talk of the Page-Kashkari amendment to change the wording of the Constitution to provide a higher requirement of funding. And just that subtle change of wording would mean, no, education would come first. And I worry that to the fullest extent possible would mandate a similar requirement upon us, when I think we would probably be allowed to do it to the extent practicable. So that is my only friendly amendment, a slight word change.
I would be happy to make those changes if somebody moves it and suggests that wording change. I am sure Ms. Quam can capture that and put that in.
So with that, if there are no further questions, we will entertain a motion from the board, and I will offer for someone to include the wording I suggested. It is within your purview, of course, to decline that option.
I will move the policy as amended in specifically Section 5B, to the fullest extent practicable.
We have a motion from Mr. Tensing
I'll second.
and a second from Ms. Malik. Thank you for that. Any further discussion of the policy before we vote?
I would just add that as we are learning more and more about this and things are changing, that this may be a policy we come back to sooner rather than later. It's great. I think we're ready to go, but
I would agree. I think
Yep.
the speed with which we put this together, really, and the emerging knowledge base that we have with COVID-19 does suggest this would be more of a living document than most of our policies.
Yeah. And I think that, just, again, I completely agree that the science may evolve. I think one thing that is clear from the science is that widespread participation is the key. More than some of the fine details, widespread compliance and participation is the key. And that simply relates to the prevalence of asymptomatic infection and pre-symptomatic shedding of the virus, and just reinforcing that the purpose of these face coverings is not to protect me from you, it's to protect you from me and the possibility that I am unknowingly exhaling infectious particles. So I think that's the key reinforcement that we have, that it's that personal responsibility that we're doing, not for ourselves, but we're doing it for everybody else.
Thanks, Pete. Any other comments or discussion before we vote? All right, again, motion from Mr. Tensing, second from Ms. Malik. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Ms. Cole, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
Chair Baraki, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right, and the vice chair votes aye, and the policy is passed. Thank you. Moving from what I hope is a once-in-a-lifetime policy, we move to policies 301 and 302, which are at least once a year, seemingly. These are our district organization charts and district administrative position assignments.
Yes, so board policies 301 and 302, which essentially name the org structure and any of the changes that have occurred. So there's a few different positions, not any form of addition of added FTE, but you'll note that there is no director of early childhood. but there is a Director of Elementary Ed, Rachel Jens, Director of Secondary Ed, Tia Clayson, previously had been in charge of overall curriculum. We did have a retirement within our Director of Special Ed and have added Dr. Alicia Mobley, Director of HR, Lisa Negus, and Supervisor of HR, Tamika Michael Sanchez. And then within our buildings, you'll note new Richfield High School Principal, Stacy Thine Collins, and Assistant Principal Maria Graver, along with Activities Director Jared Ellerson. And then finally, Assistant Superintendent Dr. LaTanya Daniels. So definitely some changes within that overall list. Does not signify any additions of FTE, just a couple of position title changes that we've already handled at the board, and then just putting those into the policy and the documents 301 and 302.
I think I would clarify, I believe that Director of Nutrition was also updated.
Director of Nutrition, Michael Manning, I apologize, correct, correct, so thank
Actually,
you.
our Dean of Students at STEM?
Dean of
Also
Students at
new.
STEM, Mr. Melmans was here last year also,
okay.
and so he is not new.
I think we covered it all, though. Does anyone have any comments or questions on these? I hope no one is surprised. That would be... No one present has comments or questions? Ms. Cole, any comments or questions? Chair Bracke?
No.
No. Okay. Well, with that, we would entertain a motion.
I would move approval of policy 301 and 302.
1 second.
We have a motion to approve by Ms. Malik. And we have a second from Ms. Cole remotely. Wonderful. She's figured out the delay. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Ms. Cole, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Bracke, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye. And the vice chair votes aye, and the policy 301 and 302, district organization chart and position assignments, has passed. We will now move on to a brand-new policy, policy 403, disability non-discrimination.
Yes, and so this is one of a few first reads of policies. And so Ms. Quam has done a thorough analysis and review of MSBA policy recommendations for mandatory policies. And so it is our admin that is now suggesting that we add actually several new policies as mandatory policies. It also aligns to the board dialogue around overall public accountability. And so these policies are things that are already enacted within procedures, within rules, within guidelines of Richfield Public Schools. It is generally, from an overall governance accountability perspective, suggested that these are policies at the board level. And so we wanted to bring these forward, including the first one, of which first one of several tonight. Again, these are just first reads, disability non-discrimination, and just making it clear that we are a fair employment place, and we will not discriminate against individuals with disabilities. And so making that clear as a board level policy, even though it is a long time practice, a clear procedure, and definitely outlined within the HR procedures of our district, making that clear from a board level and from a policy perspective. So this will be the first read.
Right, and I think it's important to clarify, as you'd mentioned a couple of times, this is in the employees' personnel section. We already have a non-discrimination policy with respect to students.
Correct. Correct.
So the only thing that I noticed is, frequently we'll have an MSBA model policy to take a look at. Is this one that no such thing exists, or was I missing it?
It's basically already that policy. But
Yeah.
This is essentially the MSBA model policy, and the only changes I believe that are in there are in D, and so we essentially are suggesting taking the MSBA model policy and then adding Craig Holge, Chief Human Resources Administrative Officer, and making those specific contact. And so essentially in each of these first reads, what you're going to see is the MSBA model policy, but with those tiny little changes.
Sure.
Because that's what we are suggesting in terms of the ratification of these.
Okay. Thank you.
Peter, are you suggesting for a second read, it would be very helpful to see that model? Because I would. I
Okay.
would suggest that.
We will put
Go
in the
for it.
MSBA model policy in addition.
I always find it very helpful.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or questions from those present? Physically present? Ms. Cole, do you have comments or questions on this policy?
I do not.
Thank you. Chair Baraki?
I do not.
All right. Well, again, as a first read, for those who have comments, as usual, we often will email direct comments to the administration and ask them to incorporate them, and we look forward to bringing this back at our next meeting for a vigorous second reading. All right. Moving on to item D, the new board policy 602, school district system accountability.
And so similarly, this also is another area where we have these pieces built in. A lot of them actually are aligned to world's best workforce, and then also within some of our other policies. Just talking very clearly about how we have goals set by the school board and by the superintendent. We're responsible for reporting those out. We are reviewing all curriculum in alignment with our curriculum advisory committee, that we implement graduation requirements, and those are actually in our credit for learning policy. And then that we have advisory committees, and these advisory committees advise us on a wide range of pieces. And so if you think about the fiscal advisory, this is referred to in here, though not directly by name, as we don't name each of our specific advisory groups. And they specifically look at our fiscal plan and our overall fiscal recommendations. And the curriculum advisory looks at the curriculum components. Technology looks at each of those technology components. And so we have a wide range of different advisories, each giving pieces of feedback in regard to the district plans, and then advising the superintendent and having that report back to the school district. And so again, this is one of those mandatory policies, or it's mandatory that these procedures occur, and it's recommended that from an accountability and policy oversight governance perspective, we have these at the board level. So with that, I will pause and see if there are any questions or comments. And we will bring back the model policy for the next time for each of this one and the next one, which is around public data requests.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from those who are here today with us?
I think my comments basically revolve around the committee criteria, and I know this is an area we've worked a lot on really engaging community to join these committees and working to match the diversity of our community and our district. So I think I would be interested in just an update on where we sit on that with those committees, how well we're doing with meeting the criteria that we are supposed to be meeting. I know that with the way that last year ended, not all committees were able to meet. Some met virtually and continued on their work, and we are just kind of getting things rolling again. But once the committees have gathered and have members kind of reconnected, I would be interested to hear that. And then also I did look it up and find it after a little searching on the new website that they are in there, and they're very nicely organized. Everything is uniform, but some things I'd like to see are the actual dates of meetings. I'm guessing they aren't in there because they haven't been set yet for this year.
Right. We are planning to launch advisories most likely in October as we get,
Right.
Again, this is a very different year than usual, and so we would usually have launched most of our committees already. We're planning to do that in October, and then usually at that first meeting, we come to a commitment of the dates, and so I would anticipate that by MEA, give or take, we should have all of those dates updated and published on the website, and then I could bring that back actually to the board and talk about committees' advisories and sort of try to give that update as best as I can.
And I think it's helpful too to have the minutes of the meetings included on the website too, once we get to that point, past meeting minutes and things like that, so. But otherwise, looks good.
Sounds good.
Are there any other questions or comments from those in the room here tonight? Okay, Ms. Cole, do you have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Chair Baraki?
I do not. Thank you.
All right. I also, I just would reflect and note that it's much of my reading of this is these policies are matching our largely matching what we do currently, and so it's good to see that whatever the model policy suggests, we've been matching it in actuality. So
Yes,
we're
they
setting a low bar.
align to our behavior and then brings it out at a public level at the board
Yeah,
level.
super. All right, thank you. All right, again, as a first-time read, we will not be moving this item, I believe, so we will move on then to New board policy 716, public data requests.
And again, similarly, we have always had procedures in this regard, and this actually also aligns to the procedures that we follow. But again, as a mandatory policy recommendation, bringing this up to the board to make that also a board policy about how we respond to public data requests. And as a government entity, we are subject to data requests. And this policy outlines, again, in the MSBA model format, how we go about working our way through data requests and how we respond to those, what is the overall time frame, and what happens in those situations. And again, as you point out, matches our practice, but brings this up to a governance accountability oversight level at the board.
Questions or comments from the board in the room? Ms. Cole, questions or comments? Chair Bracke?
None for me.
None for me as well. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the new policy to consider, and just what everyone needs as the night is hitting a certain hour. We're going to talk insurance, and in particular, we're going to talk about our workers' comp renewal.
Yep, thank you very much. We have, as Vice Chair Paula said, exciting information up here, workers' compensation renewal. This is something that we review every year. We have a renewal policy. It is based on our experience over the 3 previous plan years, so going back to 16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19, along with negotiated scheduled credits that are provided by our carrier. We are recommending that we continue with SFM insurance with a premium reduction of 3.88%. When we factor in our projected overall payroll increase, it results in a 1.9% overall reduction. Total projected premium based on projected payroll is $412,416, which is an expected decrease of $8,000. So relatively flat. We do continue to monitor our experience every year. We are expecting to see a slight increase in this previous year, but we'll monitor and see where those close out a year from now. So with that, we ask for your approval of that plan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Holge. Of the board who are here, does anyone have questions or comments about the renewal as offered?
So the only question I have is, what are the rules on, with something like this on a competitive process?
So we reviewed this last 3 years ago, and we actually switched from Travelers to SFM at that time. So we do a competitive review every year through Todd Oz based on experiences. We negotiated our rate last year. I do not know what the formal process is, but I do know that we review it regularly in a competitive process. It doesn't follow similar to HITA, where we have to review every 2 full years.
Yeah.
I want to say it's a 3 or 5 year process, but we tend to review that more frequently.
Okay. So, for example, we are the proposal is to renew with SFM, who was our carrier probably 6 or 7 years ago. Then we went to Travelers, then we left Travelers and went back to SFM.
Yep.
So within my tenure on the board, this is SFM to Travelers and back. So we've had a couple of opportunities where it has gone out to competitive bidding, and we did switch carriers. I know that. If that's your concern, I don't know what the requirements are, and I know usually for bids of a certain size,
Right.
there's a time period where we would expect to go to at least solicit competitive bids.
Right. Yep. That was just my question. Just wanted to kind of get clarity on that. Obviously, when you're looking at a savings, that's a nice thing. You just want to make sure that we're getting the best deal we can. Yeah.
Are there other questions from those in the room? Ms. Cole, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not, thank you.
Chair Bracke, any questions or comments?
No questions. I know this is really important work and people put a lot of diligence into it, and I just appreciate it, so thank you.
I just want to point out, if I could, then, on page 75 of the packet, the renewal cost comparison, this really gets to the heart of where our discount or our projected savings at the renewal comes from. And if you go down the column to the right, the percent change, you see positive increases everywhere. Positive increases for our payroll and positive increases for our rate per 100 of payroll, which is how it is calculated. It is really only when you get to the experience mod that you see any kind of significant savings or decrease, and the experience mod is built on our prior year's program performance. So we've gotten better in our overall performance, and so when Mr. Holge suggested that we might have some claims from the last year or so, they take years to unwind and finalize, and so as that experience mod changed from a factor of 1.4, meaning a 40% surcharge, to a 1.22 and only a 22% surcharge. That's where our savings is coming from right now. So if we reverted back to the 1.4, we'd be seeing roughly a 12 to 15% increase. So good experience matters, and you can explain it a number of ways, oftentimes with safety programs, change in management, change in practices, and some of it is just luck. So,
You're right.
all right. That's all I wanted to highlight. Thank you. Anytime I get to talk insurance is a good day, I figure. So with that out of the way, any other comments or questions from the board, or we could entertain a motion?
I would move approval of the workers' compensation renewal.
We have a motion from Ms. Malik,
I'll second it.
a second from Ms. Smishak. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Ms. Cole, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Baraki, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right, and the vice chair votes aye, and the workers' comp renewal is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last item on the list of new business is donations. Superintendent Unowski.
Couple of donations recommended to accept with gratitude. RPS General Fund received a regular donation of $25 through Give Minnesota from Michelle Burnside of Richfield, and RPS General Fund received a regular donation of $10 through Give Minnesota from Lisa Ferrara of Freehold, New Jersey. So we are thankful to Michelle Burnside and Lisa Ferrara.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Any comments or questions, or we could jump straight to entertaining a motion?
I will move we accept the donations with gratitude.
Ah, just a rare occurrence. A motion from Chair Bracke
And I will second.
and a second from Mr. Tensing. All right, any further discussion? All those present, if you could please, all those in favor, please vote. In favor, please say aye.
Aye.
If you are opposed, please say nay. Ms. Cole, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Chair Bracke?
Aye.
And the vice chair votes aye, and the donations are accepted with gratitude. Thank you all for suffering through my fumbling through that one. And now we are into advanced planning. And the first item in advanced planning is the legislative update, and I will look to Superintendent Unowski to see if he has heard anything on the legislative front that we should be aware of.
Nothing significantly new. I guess I would just want to give a shout out to our finance department led by Mr. Holge and Mr. Gilligan. They have been working tirelessly with all of the strings and CARES-based components, including all the documentation and applications for what's called grants, even though they're just huge amounts of paperwork, for what is called CRF funding, which is the funding for new things that are created by coronavirus that are due expenditures by the end of December, and then also CARES funding from the CARES Act and secure funding from the Secure Act. And so in addition to their regular jobs, our finance team has been dancing around to make sure that we are gaining every dollar to support our district, and I believe it is enough to make you pull your hair out, the amount. So they have been working extremely hard and deserve our acknowledgement and praise because there is significant paperwork to go with the support that we're receiving from the government, and our finance team is doing a great job in that area, so I thank them.
Do any board members have anything to provide for legislative update?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from Peter, our usual source? No? No. Anyone else? Any of those folks on the TV? No, okay. Well, all right then. Are there any other comments from board members on other items of advanced planning, or before we move on and talk about schedule? All right. Then our next board meeting will be on Monday, September. Oh,
I did have something.
ooh.
Sorry.
No, that's
I
quite
thought
all
you were
right.
calling us. I was just going to actually appreciate you, ironically, as you just wanted to speed ahead to the next item and not be recognized. thank you, Tim, for leading this meeting in person. It's actually really fun to watch somebody else do it. And as you said a few moments ago, to be able to make a motion for once. So thank you. And then the second thing is, as we have started to think about what are policies that we potentially need to have in place, and building them in, what has come back to my mind is the possibility of creating an equity policy specifically, and really defining in a more formal way what that means for us as a district and what it would then mean for us in terms of our actions, in terms of our decision making, in terms of resource allocation. And I know it's something that has come up in the past, and I think is really tied to the strategic planning work that is going to be coming to an end here fairly soon. So I just wanted to say that it's also on my mind as something for us to tackle here in the coming months.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you. I think I definitely agree with you. The strategic plan will certainly give us some information and guide us on how we might go about doing that. Okay. As I was saying, our next board meeting will be Monday, September 21st at 7 p.m. right here, or in the internet-enabled device of your choice in some instances. The meeting will include the opportunity for public comment, and there's information on how to reach out to Chair Brackey to participate in the public comment section. Following that, we also meet Monday, October 5th, also at 7 p.m. in the boardroom. Are there any items that board members would like to hear or consider for an upcoming agenda?
I do have a request. One of the big action items for the past month was creation of a process for tracking and managing COVID cases within our buildings. And I know that Dr. Clarkson and her team of folks have been working very hard and have put together a sound process to do that. And of course, we are supported by MDH and MDE. What I would like to request is, to the extent that this could be done, is anytime you're implementing a new process, obviously implementation is it's one thing to design a process, it's another thing to implement it effectively, and to make sure that all of the wheels are turning and the gears are meshing, et cetera. So one thing that I guess I would like to request is a demo or reporting mechanism. I think a demo would be nice for us to see and to also share with the public what our process is going to be, so that we can be really clear on what that transparency is going to look like. As you know, we obviously all have our fingers crossed that cases remain within a manageable level. But that's obviously the source of anxiety coming forward throughout this fall and winter with the unknown trajectory that the epidemic can take. So I guess I think could be helpful in terms of not only having an accountability piece in place for our team to give them a chance to show kind of how the system works and make sure that it gets a dry run, but then also to foster some confidence among the public that we're sticking to our word and we're bringing this into real fruition.
So we will bring in Dr. Clarkson to our next meeting. I see her already giving the head shake on our screens at the moment. So she will come on in with our decision tree, and she will kind of walk through what do we do in COVID cases, and then she will also remove some of the details of some of the COVID cases that appear in our world and kind of walk through what this looks like on the ground. And so we will absolutely do that, and I believe, given the agenda, we can have her at the next meeting.
With any luck, it will still be just a dry run, Peter.
Correct. Keep our fingers crossed on that.
Okay. Ms. Cole or Chair Brackey, do you have items to share that you'd like to see on a future agenda?
I do not.
Okay. Nor
I'm
do
good
I.
as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, then the final item of business on the agenda is to adjourn, and this item does not require a full board vote. So following Chair Brackey's lead, I will officially adjourn the meeting as Vice Chair at 8:30 p.m. I hope everyone has a good evening, stays safe and well, and we will see you again on September 21st.